When I think back to the night it happened, I still hear the faint rattle of the old window beside my bed. It was late September, and the air carried that in-between chill that made you pull the blanket a little tighter. I was 34 then, living in the same small house my parents left behind, the one my sister and I once shared as children. Her name was Caroline. 2 years younger, always the one who could talk her way out of anything. We'd grown up together, but by that point I'd learned that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. I'd spent most of that day working from home. I'm an illustrator, mostly small commissions, book covers, greeting cards, children's stories. It doesn't make me rich, but it gives me peace. My cat Miso was my constant companion through all those quiet hours. He wasn't just a pet. He was a witness to my solitude. I used to joke that he was the only man who never lied to me. Miso had a soft gray coat with a white spot under his chin, like a drop of milk frozen in fur. When I'd sketch late into the night, he'd curl beside my laptop, his tail brushing my arm, as if reminding me to breathe. That night I came home from a short walk to find the living room oddly still. The house had this silence that didn't feel empty, it felt wrong. I called out Miso. He usually came running, his bell jingling faintly from the little collar I bought him on his first birthday. But nothing came. I checked the kitchen, the sofa under the couch. Nothing. Then I saw that the back door was slightly open, swinging gently in the evening wind. My heart sank. I called his name again, louder this time, stepping into the yard, my slippers sinking into the damp grass. The moonlight spilled over the fence, and for a moment I thought I saw his shadow near the shed. But when I got closer, it was just a pile of leaves. I stayed outside until nearly midnight, whispering his name into the darkness like a prayer. He didn't come back. At first, I told myself maybe he'd slipped out and would return by morning. Cats wander, right? That's what everyone said. But something in me knew better. Miso was cautious. He didn't wander. He stayed close to me because, like me, he'd learned not to trust the world too much. By the next morning, I was frantic. I printed flyers, posted on neighborhood boards, even went door to door. People were kind but unhelpful. "We'll keep an eye out," they said. Days passed, no one called. It was on the 4th day that Caroline showed up. I hadn't seen her in over a month. Our relationship had been complicated. She was the kind of woman who always needed attention, new clothes, new perfumes, new friends who could take her to nicer places. After our parents died, she moved in with a boyfriend and stopped visiting except when she needed something. She arrived that morning wearing sunglasses and a designer coat, carrying her new handbag like it was a trophy. I remember the way she tossed it on the counter, smiling that easy, shallow smile she'd perfected. "Long time, sis," she said, brushing her hair back. "You look tired. What's wrong?" I told her about Miso, about how he'd vanished. My voice cracked halfway through. She frowned slightly, as if trying to recall something. "The gray one, right? The quiet cat." I nodded. Maybe he just ran off. Cats do that. But then her eyes flicked for a second toward her bag. A small movement, but enough. Something inside me froze. It was subtle, a tremor of instinct, the kind that tells you someone isn't being fully honest. I couldn't place it then, but that look stayed with me. We had coffee. She talked endlessly about her new job at some boutique downtown, about how she'd met a man who drove a Mercedes. I half listened, my thoughts drifting. She noticed my distracted silence and sighed dramatically. "You really should get out more," she said. "This house feels like a museum." I said nothing. I wanted her to leave, but she lingered, admiring her reflection in the window. That night I couldn't sleep. The memory of her glance toward the bag replayed in my mind. The bag itself, soft tan leather gold clasp gleaming like something expensive, and something about it. It seemed new, too new. The next morning I went into town. I didn't even know why at first, only that I needed air. I walked past the boutique where she said she worked. Through the glass, I saw her laughing with another girl showing off the same handbag. My stomach turned. So I went home and sat at my desk surrounded by unfinished sketches. The air felt too still. I opened my laptop, searching through local online marketplaces out of impulse. I typed gray cat adoption just to see, and there he was. Or at least it was his photo. Miso curled in someone's lap. The background was familiar. My own couch, my blue throw blanket. The listing said, "Friendly adult cat, healthy, recently vaccinated, rehomed due to allergies, $200. The date 3 days ago. The day after he disappeared. My breath caught. My hands trembled. I clicked the seller's profile. The username was New Anonymous, but the profile picture, a tiny cropped image, showed a mirror selfie of a woman holding her phone, and even in that small reflection, I recognized the nails. Caroline's nails, pale pink with a single rhinestone on the ring finger. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, waiting for the world to make sense again. It didn't. I called her. She didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. By the 5th call, she texted back. "Busy, can't talk." I typed, "Where's my cat?" She left it on red. The next day, she showed up again. This time without the coat, wearing casual clothes, acting like nothing was wrong. She brought pastries from that fancy bakery she knew I couldn't afford. I didn't even let her step inside. "Where's Miso?" I asked. Her smile faltered. "What? Don't play dumb, Caroline. I saw the listing." Her eyes widened just slightly. She started to speak, then looked away, feigning offense. "Are you accusing me of selling your cat?" "My cat," I repeated, voice trembling. "He wasn't just a cat, he was family." She crossed her arms. "You're being ridiculous. It was just an animal. You get so dramatic over everything." That broke something in me. I had loved her through every lie, every selfish thing she'd done. I'd paid her debts, covered her rent when she was between boyfriends, defended her when people called her shallow. But this was different. She hadn't just taken something I owned. She'd taken something that loved me back. "Tell me the truth," I said quietly. She sighed, rolling her eyes. "Fine, I sold him okay. I needed money. The bag was on sale and I didn't think you'd notice. You're always buried in your art, talking to that cat like he's human. I thought maybe losing him would help you. I don't know, grow up." For a second, the world went silent. I couldn't hear the ticking clock, the traffic outside, even my own breath. Just her words echoing in my head. "I sold him." I wanted to scream, but no sound came. Instead, I stepped back and closed the door in her face. She called through it, shouting that I was overreacting, that it wasn't a big deal. Her voice faded as she left, her heels clicking down the walkway like nails against glass. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. I wasn't just mourning Miso, I was mourning the last piece of family I thought I had left. In the following days, I searched desperately for the buyer. The listing had been deleted, but I'd saved the phone number. I called, left messages, pleaded. Finally, after 2 weeks, a woman called back. Her name was Nora. She said she'd bought the cat but was willing to meet me. We met in a park. She was kind with warm eyes and a soft voice. When she saw my face, she seemed to understand everything without words. Miso, well, she called him Jasper, now is safe, she said. But if he's yours, you should have him back. When she brought him out from the carrier, I broke. He recognized me instantly, brushing his head against my hand, purring like nothing had happened. I thanked her over and over, crying into his fur. But when I looked up, Nora hesitated. "Can I tell you something?" she said gently. "The woman who sold him, she told me you'd died. That's why she was selling him. Said she was your sister trying to find him a good home." My breath caught again cold this time. "She said you died," I repeated. Nora nodded slowly. I felt my heart twist in ways I didn't know it could. It wasn't enough that she sold him, she'd buried me too in her story. To her I was expendable, a name to erase if it got her what she wanted. When I got home, Miso curled on my lap like nothing had happened, but inside me something irreversible had changed. That was the night I decided Caroline would finally understand what it meant to lose something irreplaceable. I didn't sleep much after that night. The idea of revenge didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly like water through the cracks of a dam. At first it was just anger, raw and choking, the kind that keeps your hands trembling long after the tears stop. But then came something colder, sharper, a kind of calm that scares you because it makes pain feel like purpose. For days, I avoided calling her. I ignored the texts she sent, small, meaningless messages like, "Can we talk?" or "I think we both overreacted." I knew better than to answer. Caroline never apologized because she was sorry. She apologized because she feared consequences. Meanwhile, I went on with my days pretending to function. I fed Miso, I painted, I answered emails from clients. But beneath it all, I was building something. A plan. Not to hurt her physically, no. That wasn't who I was. I wanted her to feel what I had felt, the hollow loneliness, the humiliation of realizing the person you trusted most saw you as nothing but a tool. One evening, I opened my parents' old photo albums. Caroline's face stared back at me from countless pages, her smile, her hand clutching mine as children, our birthdays, the matching dresses Mom had sewn for us. There had been love once, real love. But greed eats love like rust eats metal. It starts slow, then suddenly everything collapses. When our parents died, they left behind the house a few savings and their small antique shop. I'd wanted to keep the shop going, but Caroline pushed to sell it. It's just stuff she'd said signing the papers without a glance. The money disappeared within months. Clothes, dinners, a man who drove her to Vegas and left her there. I picked up the pieces as always. Now, sitting alone with those old photos, I realized something that chilled me. She never learned what loss meant, because I had always cushioned her from it. Every bad choice she made, I softened the fall. She'd always known that no matter what she destroyed, I would still be there to help rebuild. That was going to change. I started by visiting the boutique where she worked. She hadn't seen me coming. I stood outside watching her through the glass. She was helping a customer, laughing in that overly charming way she used to disarm people. I noticed how often she glanced at her reflection in the mirror, how she tilted her head when she spoke. It was all performance. When the customer left, I walked in. Her smile froze. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly, glancing at her manager. I didn't answer right away. I wandered toward a display of handbags, the same brand as the one she'd bought with Miso's life. Nice collection, I said. Do they all cost a living soul, or was that a one-time offer? Her face drained of color. Not here, she hissed. Please. I leaned closer. You told someone I was dead. Her eyes flicked around nervously. Can we not do this here? Oh, we can, I said softly. Because you need to understand what that felt like, to be erased by your own sister. She looked down ashamed or pretending to be. I panicked, okay, I didn't know what to say to the buyer. I thought it'd make it easier. Easier for who? You or me, the ghost? She didn't answer. Her boss called her from the counter, asking if everything was fine. She nodded, forcing a smile. I walked out before she could say another word. That was step 1. Let her know I wasn't gone and that I wasn't forgiving. That night I started collecting everything I knew about her life. Not in a creepy way, but methodically. I knew her patterns. She couldn't keep secrets. She posted everything online. Her selfies, her outfits, her brunches, her business meetings that were really dates with men who promised her luxury. I started saving things, photos, comments, little inconsistencies. Then I remembered something. When our parents passed, I handled most of the legal paperwork. Caroline never cared about documents, so she'd signed things blindly. One of those things was a joint deed to a small storage property our father used to rent for antique restoration. It was still in both our names, but she'd forgotten it existed. Inside that storage unit were boxes of old inventory furniture, even a few collectibles worth real money now. It hit me, then karma doesn't always arrive naturally. Sometimes you have to give it directions. I went to the storage unit the next morning. The air smelled of dust and varnish, but the moment I switched on the light, I felt something warm in my chest. The place was like a frozen time capsule of our parents' hard work oak chairs, porcelain vases, a grandfather clock still ticking faintly after all these years. Over the next week, I spent my nights there cleaning, cataloging, restoring. I called an appraiser I trusted from my art circle. When she came, she was stunned. These pieces are valuable, she said. Do you have any idea what you've got here? I smiled faintly. Enough to start over. She nodded easily. I decided I'd reopen our parents' shop under my own name. Not for profit, but as a statement. The life Caroline dismissed as just stuff would now be my redemption and her reminder. But the real twist came later when I discovered a small envelope tucked behind an old mirror frame. It was sealed in my father's handwriting. I opened it carefully, my hands shaking. Inside was a letter dated just a week before he died. My girls, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I want you both to have a fair chance in life. The house belongs to whoever keeps it as a home, not an investment. The shop, however, will rightfully belong to the one who values it not by money, but by heart. I could almost hear his voice in those words. He'd known. Somehow he'd seen this coming, the difference between us. I didn't need the letter to prove anything, but now I had it. Proof that love, not greed, had always been his measure. So I made copies. I wanted Caroline to see what she'd traded for a handbag. When she showed up a few days later pretending to make peace, I handed her the copy of the letter. She read it quickly, her eyes darting over the lines. "What is this supposed to mean?" she asked. "It means the shop is mine," I said quietly. "Legally and morally. Dad made sure of that." She scoffed. "That's ancient. It won't hold up in court." I smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but it doesn't need to. It just needs to hold up in your conscience if you still have one." Her expression hardened. "You're really going to do this over a cat?" I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my sister. I saw a stranger who'd chosen vanity over love so many times that she no longer recognized the difference. "It's not about the cat," I said softly. "It's about what he represented, loyalty, something you'll never understand." She didn't respond. She just turned, muttering something under her breath, and slammed the door on her way out. I thought that was the end of it, but a week later I got a notice in the mail. She'd filed a claim challenging ownership of the storage property. I should have expected it. Greed doesn't die easily, it fights even when there's nothing left to win. But I wasn't afraid. I'd been quiet all my life, and silence had taught me patience. The day of the hearing, she showed up wearing that same handbag the one Miso had been sold for. The sight of it made my stomach twist, but I kept my calm. I let her speak first. She spun her story with practiced innocence, saying she had helped maintain the property and deserved equal rights. When it was my turn, I presented the letter. The judge read it, expression unreadable. Then he looked at me. "This document shows intent," he said, "and since the property wasn't used or maintained by the co-owner in years, I see no reason to divide it." Caroline's face fell. She opened her mouth to protest, but the gavel came down. Case closed. Outside the courthouse, she turned to me, eyes blazing. "You think you've won? You'll regret this." I met her gaze evenly. I already did, years ago. Then I walked away. That night, I lit a candle beside Miso's bed. He purred softly, pressing his head against my hand as if he understood. I whispered, "We're okay now." But part of me knew it wasn't over yet. Caroline wasn't the kind to accept loss gracefully, and I had a feeling the final chapter of this story was still waiting to be written. 2 weeks passed before I heard from her again. I'd begun to settle into something that almost felt like peace. My days were filled with the quiet hum of purpose, cleaning the old shop, restoring pieces of furniture that carried my parents' fingerprints, painting signs, in the soft amber light of dusk. The smell of varnish and cedar replaced the bitterness that had clung to me for months. I even started smiling again when Miso pawed at my sketchbook, demanding attention. But peace never lasts when someone like Caroline exists on the other side of it. It was late afternoon when she showed up unannounced. I was bent over a half-polished table when I heard her voice at the door. That voice I once loved, now threaded with something venomous. "You really did it," she said, stepping inside like she still belonged there. "You reopened it." I looked up slowly. She wore her resentment like perfume, thick enough to choke the air. "I did," I said quietly. "It was always supposed to live. Dad wanted that." She circled the shop, touching things like they were contaminated. "You're delusional if you think you can run a business. You barely keep yourself together. You've been a mess since he died." Her words stung, but I had learned not to show it. Maybe I said, "But I'm still here, still standing." She smiled without warmth, not for long. She dropped a folder on the counter. Inside were printed screenshots of me, photos from my social media, my art page, even my private commissions. "I've reported you," she said, "for tax evasion, for using the shop illegally, for selling restored antiques without license." I froze. "You did what?" Her smile widened. "You wanted revenge." "Now you've got mine. I told you you shouldn't have messed with me." I could feel my pulse in my throat. "Caroline, this is insane. You know I'm doing everything legally. I've filed all the papers." "Prove it," she said. "Let's see how much your little moral high ground helps you when the city comes knocking." Then she left her heels clicking against the floorboards, The same rhythm as the day she walked away from me all those years ago. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind replayed every word she said. I knew she didn't care about the law, she cared about chaos. She wanted me to crumble, to give up the one thing that had finally made me whole. But she underestimated me. Again. The next morning I went straight to the city office. I brought every form, every receipt, every license. I spoke to the officers myself calmly, clearly. They saw through her accusations quickly. Everything I'd done was legitimate. They even apologized for the inconvenience. Still, her attack left something deeper than fear. It left resolve. That evening, I sat by the shop window looking out at the street where we'd once played as children. The sunset painted the glass gold, and for a moment I saw our younger selves, Caroline chasing me down the sidewalk, both of us laughing, holding melting ice cream cones. There was a time she looked at me with love, not envy. What happened to that girl? The answer came like a whisper from somewhere deep inside. I let her believe the world revolved around her. I thought that was love. The next day, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, but I recognized her handwriting, sharp, elegant, with the same arrogance it always had. Inside was a single note. "You win, sister. I hope your cat keeps you warm when no one else will." For a while, I just stared at it. The words didn't hurt me, they made me pity her, because she'd reduced herself to nothing more than spite. But something still gnawed at me. That sense that she wasn't finished. I kept the letter in a drawer next to my father's old one. 2 voices from the past, one built on love, one on hatred. A week later, my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. "Is this Evelyn Harper?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is from St. Francis Hospital. Are you related to a Caroline Monroe?" My breath caught. "She's my sister." "Why?" "There's been an accident." The world tilted. My knees nearly gave out. I drove there without thinking, my heart pounding so hard I could barely see. The drive was only 15 minutes, but it felt endless. I kept whispering to myself, "She's fine. She's fine." When I reached the hospital, the nurse led me to a quiet room. Caroline was there, lying pale and still against white sheets. Her right arm was in a sling, and there was a bruise across her temple. She was awake, but barely. Her eyes flicked open when she heard me. For a second, they softened, then clouded again. "What happened?" I asked the nurse. "Car accident," she said gently. "She's lucky to be alive." Another car ran a red light. When the nurse left, I sat beside the bed, my hands shaking. "You shouldn't be here," Caroline murmured. Her voice was weak, stripped of its usual venom. "Where else would I be?" I whispered. She turned her head away. "Don't act like you care." I wanted to yell to remind her of everything she'd done. But in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in years, fear. Not anger, not arrogance, just fear. So I reached for her hand. "I do care," I said. "You're still my sister." Her lips trembled. "I thought you hated me." I swallowed hard. Maybe I did. For a while. But hate doesn't fix anything. It just eats you alive. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then a tear slipped from her eye. "I sold your cat," she whispered, "and I told people you were dead. You should hate me." "I did," I said quietly. "But that was the day I stopped being your victim." Silence filled the room. Then, with a trembling breath, she said, "I lost everything, Evelyn. The job, the apartment, the guy. They're all gone. I was driving to your house. I was going to ask for help, and then—" She trailed off, her voice breaking. I didn't see the light. The ache in my chest was unbearable. For the first time, I saw her not as the villain of my story, but as a broken reflection of what I could have been if I'd let bitterness take over. "I forgive you," I said softly. Her eyes widened, searching mine for a trace of sarcasm, but there was none. "Why?" she asked. "Because I can't carry this anymore. I need to live." She closed her eyes, and for a long while neither of us spoke. The machines hummed softly beside her. When I left that night, I didn't know if she'd recover fully, but something in me had already healed. Weeks passed. She stayed in the hospital longer than expected. I visited often, bringing her small things, books, snacks, even flowers from the garden. Slowly, she changed. The sharp edges of her tone softened. The arrogance dimmed. She began asking about the shop, about miso. Sometimes we sat in silence, both knowing words weren't enough. Then one afternoon she surprised me. "When I get out," she said, "I want to help at the shop. I mean, if you'd let me." I studied her face. There was sincerity there, hesitant, fragile, but real. "Let's see," I said, "one day at a time." And that was how it began. Months later, when she finally stepped into the shop again, she didn't look like the sister who'd once betrayed me. She looked smaller, humbler. Her hair pulled back, her makeup gone. She moved slowly, reverently, as if afraid to touch anything. "This place feels different," she said. "It's alive again," I told her. We started working side by side, quietly at first. She swept floors, arranged displays, learned how to polish wood. There were awkward silences and small mistakes, but I didn't correct her harshly. I let her learn. One evening after closing, she handed me something, a small velvet pouch. "I sold the bag," she said softly, "the one I bought with his life. I couldn't keep it anymore. Here." Inside were folded bills, almost the same amount she'd gotten for miso. I looked at her, tears rising. "You didn't have to." "I did," she interrupted. "It's time I start giving things back." For the first time in years, I believed her. That night, I sat by the window with miso on my lap, watching the lights fade across the street. I thought of all the versions of us, the sisters we were, the enemies we became, and the fragile peace we were learning to build. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single act. Maybe it was a daily choice to see the wound without reopening it. The following months felt like a season I'd never experienced before, not because of the weather, but because of what it did inside me. Everything slowed down. There were no explosions, no screaming matches, no grand apologies. Just the quiet rhythm of two sisters trying to learn how to coexist again after burning every bridge between them. The shop became our sanctuary. Mornings started with the creak of the old front door and the smell of fresh varnish. Caroline would arrive early sometimes, even before me, setting out chairs on the porch, sweeping the front steps. It was small, almost tender, the kind of thing I never thought she'd do willingly. We didn't talk about the past at first. Every word between us felt fragile, like handling glass. But over time, silence gave way to small moments of laughter about customers, about our clumsy attempts at bookkeeping, about how miso had taken a particular dislike to one of our regulars. Those moments didn't erase what she'd done, but they began to soften the jagged edges. Still, forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. There were nights I'd close my eyes and see that first evening when miso vanished the open door. The empty silence, her smile when she showed off the bag. The memories came in flashes, uninvited and unwelcome. I would lie awake, feeling the ache of betrayal settle in my chest all over again. But every time I felt myself drowning in it, I'd look at her the next day, sweeping, smiling shyly, trying so hard to be better, and I'd remind myself that revenge had already done its job. She had lost everything she once worshipped, and yet somehow life had given her one last chance. I suppose I was learning that sometimes karma doesn't destroy. Sometimes it rebuilds in ways you never expect. One Sunday afternoon, as we were closing the shop, she called out to me from the counter. "Evelyn, can you come here a second?" I wiped my hands and walked over. She was holding a small framed picture. "Found this behind one of the cabinets," she said. It was a photo of us two little girls sitting on the shop floor, our faces covered in paint, holding up a crooked wooden birdhouse we'd built with Dad. I could still remember that day. We'd argued over who got to paint the roof, then ended up laughing until we both dropped our brushes. Caroline smiled faintly. "We were happy then, weren't we?" I nodded, feeling my throat tighten. We were. She ran her thumb along the edge of the frame. "I keep thinking about how easily I ruined all of that. I don't even know why anymore. It's like I kept wanting more, and every time I got it, it meant less." Her honesty startled me. She wasn't one for self-reflection. "I think we both just wanted love," I said softly. "We just went looking for it in different places." She glanced up, eyes glistening. "You always found it in people. I tried to buy it." Neither of us spoke for a long time after that. We just stood there looking at the photo, the late sunlight spilling through the front window like honey. In the months that followed, the shop began to thrive. People started coming not just for the antiques, but for the feeling. The place had warmth again. Maybe they could sense the story woven into every piece, two sisters trying to mend what greed had broken. Caroline started a small social media page for the shop, posting photos of restored items with little captions like, "Everything deserves a second life." It caught on quickly. People loved her charm, the same charm that once manipulated, now redeemed. And then one afternoon, she came to me holding a small orange kitten. "Meet Milo," she said shyly. I thought Miso could use a friend. I froze for a moment, unsure how to react. The last time she'd brought an animal into my story, it ended in heartbreak. But then I saw the way she was holding him carefully, lovingly, like she finally understood what living things meant. I nodded slowly. "He can stay." She smiled. "Thank you." From that day forward, Miso and Milo became inseparable. They chased each other through the aisles, curled up in sunbeams, and occasionally stole customers' attention. Watching them made something in me heal that I hadn't realized was still wounded. Then one rainy evening, Caroline and I sat by the window of the shop sipping tea as thunder rolled in the distance. The world outside was gray and soft, but inside everything felt warm. She looked at me quietly. "Evelyn," she said, "if I could go back, if I could undo what I did, I would, every bit of it." I stared at her for a long time, seeing not the sister who betrayed me, but the woman who finally learned what it meant to feel remorse. "You can't change the past," I said, "but you can build a better ending." She smiled, faintly, tears catching the reflection of the lamp. "I'm trying," and I believed her. It was almost a year after the accident when the call came. It was early morning. The light had just begun to filter through the curtains when my phone rang. I answered groggily, expecting it to be a supplier, but it was a doctor. Caroline had collapsed at home. They said it was her heart. She didn't make it to the hospital. I sat there frozen, the mug of coffee still in my hand, the steam dissolving into the air. For a long time, I didn't cry. I just stared at the wall, unable to process it. We had only just found our way back to each other. The universe can be cruel that way, giving you closure and then snatching it away before you're ready. At her funeral, I placed the old photo, the one of us painting the birdhouse, inside her casket. Her hand, still and delicate, rested around it like she was holding onto something she'd been searching for all her life. When it was over, I went home and sat by the window with Miso and Milo curled beside me. The rain had stopped, and sunlight broke through the clouds, washing the world in gold. In that quiet light, I finally cried. Not just for her death, but for everything that came before it, the lies, the greed, the laughter, the love we almost lost forever. I whispered into the still air. You were wrong, Caroline. I'm not alone. You're still here in every lesson, in every scar, in every piece of me that learned how to forgive. Later, when I walked into the shop, I noticed something new on the front counter. It was the handbag, the same one. A nurse had found it among her belongings and returned it. It looked worn, now faded at the edges. I ran my hand over it, feeling the cracked leather, and smiled sadly. It wasn't a symbol of greed anymore. It was a relic of redemption, proof that even the ugliest parts of our story could find peace. That evening, I placed the bag on the highest shelf in the shop. Not as something for sale, but as a reminder. Whenever customers asked about it, I simply said, "That one's not for purchase. It already costs too much." Sometimes they'd laugh, sometimes they'd look confused, but I didn't explain further. Some things were meant to stay between sisters. Years have passed since then. The shop still stands. The cats still nap in the window, and sometimes I still catch myself expecting her voice when the door chime rings. But instead of sadness, there's gratitude now. Because even though betrayal nearly broke me, forgiveness rebuilt me stronger. I often tell people family doesn't always mean harmony. Sometimes it means surviving each other. And if you're lucky, finding grace before it's too late. So, if you've ever loved someone who hurt you deeply, I hope you find peace the way I did. Not through revenge, but through understanding that some souls only learn the value of love when it's almost gone. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched something inside you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave me a comment. Tell me what forgiveness means to you. And if you'd like to hear more true stories like mine, remember to follow and stay with me for the next one.